And now I have the honor to invite to the stage, please, the distinguished leader of the Indian delegation to the Assembly. We had, representatives from China and the United States earlier on, and many of you might know that before the end of this decade, India will become the third largest economy in the world. So, Admiral, thank you very much for being here with us. And we are going to have this in a form of a dialogue, so you can ask questions pretty soon. But if I may start by asking you to explain to the participants and this distinguished audience why it is that India is now taking an increasing interest in the Arctic. And perhaps describe also, as you told me when I was in Delhi recently, how within the governmental system of India you now have quarterly meetings of representatives from different ministries and institutions to coordinate the effort of India, not just in the Arctic, but also in the other ice-covered areas of the world. Please.
At the outset, let me thank you for inviting us here to participate in the Arctic, the Circle Assembly. In fact, this is my first visit, so thank you once again. With respect to the questions that you put, the first thing is, it is not that India has taken interest now in the Arctic. We have our religious texts, very old, called Vedas. In fact, some of the interpretations say that during the Ice Age, the movement of the ancient people were staying in the Arctic, and the movement was towards Asia. So, I mean, our scriptures do say that. Thereafter, in fact, we had signed the Svalbard Treaty in 1920. And thereafter, of course, we'd established our station in Norway way back in 2007. In 2013, we got the observer status. With respect to the Antarctic, we've been there since 1981, and we've finished more than 40 plus scientific expeditions there, and 14 of them to the Arctic. And now we man our station 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So our interest has been there, but the interest is primarily because we are an agrarian society. 70% of our produce, of agricultural produce, is because of our monsoons. And what we have the world's largest population. We have to feed our population. And the feed comes from the monsoons and the agricultural produce which comes out of it. If there is a problem in the monsoon, our own existence is at stake, which we are seeing for the last few years. There are a number of climatic catastrophes that are happening. We are realizing that 1 centimeter of the ice reduces in the Arctic, and we have 100 centimeters of rain somewhere in the Indian subcontinent, and we have whole villages washing down. So therefore, we have issues. So we study, we invest we have invested in the science and research in the Arctic so that we understand what exactly happens here and how that affects us. If we understand that, at least we can predict. If we can predict, we can at least we can save our men and maybe material. So therefore, at least there's disaster relief. But what about disaster prevention? For that, we continue to study, and let's see what we can come out with.
I think it's a powerful statement, as you have just described, how tiny amount of the melting of the ice in the Arctic has a prominent impact on the monsoon system and thereby the potential to feed well over 1 billion people just in India. And if you then add China to that, another 1 billion and plus, you have more than 2.5 billion people in these two countries where the food production is predominantly dependent on what happened to the ice in our part of the world. So to me, that is one of the clearest examples of why these Asian leaders, each of them with well over 1 billion people, should be interested in the Arctic and build up research facilities in helping us to monitor. But I also asked you, and you diplomatically skipped that having followed India for a long time, I noticed when I was there last few weeks ago that you now have an intergovernmental, interministerial, consultative policy-making mechanism up and running. And you are one of the leaders of that mechanism on behalf of the Prime Minister's office. Can you tell us a little bit more why you are doing that? Because I see it as an enhancement of the Indian governmental engagement, and also how it works.
We have an Antarctica Act that we gave to ourselves in 2022, and an Arctic policy that we gave to ourselves in 2022 again. We realize that in most cases, the policies are made on paper, and that's it. So in our case, what we have done is, I'll talk firstly with respect to the Arctic policy. We have a mechanism wherein all the stakeholders, whether it is climate change, whether it is our Commerce Ministry, whether it is the strategic part of the government, or any other person or the Ministry of Earth Sciences who deal with these issues, Arctic issues, we get all the stakeholders to physically come and sit every 3 months in our office. It's a physical session. They sit. We made, from our policy, we took out various activities. To each activity, we identified, specified, and implied tasks to achieve the aim. Those are flashed, and every 3 months, it is updated. We ask them individually, what have you done about this, and what is your plan to do next in next 3 months? So that is done, and the checklist is read out in front of everyone. Therefore, people take it a little seriously, and it is monitored by the PMO, the Prime Minister's office, which I belong to. So therefore, it is taken seriously, and we regularly monitor, and I'm happy to say that the checklist is slowly, the numbers are reducing. That means people are doing their jobs. So this is something that we do to ensure that our future aims that we had given to ourselves are met in a planned manner. On similar lines, we have the Arctic Act that we have done. That is every 6 months is an empowered committee which meets. They give the approval if someone wants to go or someone should go, he can't go. Why should he go, and what is he going to do in Antarctica in our research station? And what is he going to get back? Then it is audited, checked. Physically, whatever it gets back is checked. Even if it's scientific, whatever it is, it's done that way. So that way, a monitoring mechanism has been established for both the Arctic policy as well as the Antarctic Act.
Well, thank you very much. And let me ask to have the lights up in the hall so I can see who wants to ask questions. And while we are waiting for people to put up their hands, there's one there, which I think I've been concentrating on this part of the hall. So I think. But let me say before you put your questions, it's a wonderfully Indian bureaucratic tradition to put a rare admiral in charge of whipping these different ministries in line on executing these policies. Maybe we should also adopt that in some other countries. No, it's interesting how you have decided to really make this happen. I find that very interesting. So please, introduce yourself and ask your question.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm Sheikh Al-Mazroui from Abu Dhabi, representing the Research Council. My question is a more generic question about the glacial melting, and how do you envision the involvement of the AI tools to predict where are the upcoming more melting, and if there will be any chance in the future to develop some technologies that will allow us to preserve those melting glacial as a future reservoir for water for the world.
So the Himalayas extend 2,400 plus kilometers, and the average heights are 4,000 to 5,000 meters. And within India, we have 9,575 glaciers, of which about 296 or 276 are more than 10 square kilometers in, I would say, area. A glacier melt has been one of the primary causes of destruction in our northern belt. So therefore, we have a good space program, and ISRO runs it. We are having specific instruments to observe, monitor, have a data banking system on all these glaciers, including with taking photographic details, so that we monitor the growth of the glacial or the melt in the glaciers and the formation of lakes. The problem with lakes is if the lakes break the bund, they come down, and when they come from 4,000 meters, it's an arrow, and like they come down at that speed, and that causes phenomenal destruction. Therefore, the AI tools are, again, they need data. So the development of the data is being made with using space technology primarily, and where we can go physically with the sending manpower, we do send, and we are measuring the glacial melts and the glacial lake expansions, and therefore the alternate means of their movement downhill, so that downhill near the villages there's no problem. So therefore, and this data will be used in our AI, whatever we make, so that we get the prediction capability at the earliest, and we predict the likely movement of the burst of glacial burst and save ourselves.
Okay, so are there any other questions? Yes, there's one there. Take that as the last question. Yeah.
Hello, thank you. My name's Sam Morgan. I'm a meteorology student at the University of Massachusetts. I want to thank you, Rear Admiral, for coming all the way from Delhi to address us here in Reykjavik. My question to you is if you could address India's hesitation sometimes in signing on to G20 initiatives, such as the initiative at COP28 last year to triple renewable energy capacity worldwide by 2030.
Yeah, renewable, we hesitate unless we are sure we don't sign. That is the first part. In this case, out of the 175 gigawatts of renewable electricity that we produce in our country, 100 gigawatts is solar. And we are the third largest user of solar energy, and fourth largest in wind, and fifth largest in hydel. So actually, in our case, we are doing it, but in 2030, we're not very sure we'll be able to achieve it. So therefore, we are taking a planned call, okay, what we can do, what we can't do, but we are progressively making extensive efforts to achieve the aim. Whether we sign or not, we're going to achieve it, and otherwise our Prime Minister has given to ourselves that by 2070, we'll be fully green, zero. And as per that planned per chart, we are well ahead of the schedule. So we will sign where we are, so that we sign and then we meet the commitment. It's not that we'll not meet thereafter.
Well, let me just draw your attention to the fact that at this stage now, in this opening session, the climate envoy of China and now Rear Admiral Prasanna have both stated the extraordinary ambitious goal of these two largest countries in the world in terms of renewable energy targets and carbon neutrality. This is historic, friends. This is historic. In a public platform, in this democratic open gathering, to state these goals in this way. Because it's only very few years ago that the prevailing view in the Western world was that China and India are the problem. China and India are the problem. They are using coal and oil and so on and so forth. And very few people would have hoped that within a decade we would have seen these transformations. So I just want to draw your attention to the profound nature of this statement that you have just issued now, and the statement issued by the Chinese climate envoy earlier on today. But as a way to go forward, we also agreed in Delhi, together with not only you and the other ministries, but also ORF, the Observer Research Foundation, which is the biggest policy-making non-governmental platform in India, the largest. The big offices not only in India, but in Washington, Dubai, and other places. We agreed together that the next Arctic Circle Forum will be the Arctic Circle India Forum in Delhi in April of next year. And there we will also continue the polar dialogue, which we have started at this assembly. So we are taking the opportunity of your presence here while thanking you for not only your contribution, but your attendance at the assembly, of announcing formally that the next Arctic Circle Forum will be in Delhi in April. So you better start booking your flights and organizing your life. So you can witness this historic event that in the first time in history, India will be the host for this large international gathering on Arctic and polar future. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Thank you.